Maggie. I'm one of the educators at the Florida School of Holistic Living, and I would really like to share with you a plant that I hold near and dear. Bidens alba is what I have in my yard. There are many species in the genus Bidens. This is our beautiful Bidens alba. It's native to Florida. There are other species that you would hear about. Bidens Pilosa is one of them. They are often used interchangeably. But our Bidens alba, beggar's tick, Spanish needle, sometimes called our farmer's friend. Its habitat is dry, full sun. It's one of those plants that you probably see all along I-4 or any interstate system you have near you. It's these beautiful white flowers. It has a square stem, which is typically common for plants in the mint family, but that's not true for this one. This plant is in the Asteraceae family. And all of the flowers in the Asteraceae family have the thing in common of being composite flowers. So you can see, let's see this one. You can see that the yellow in the middle and these white petals are actually lots of little flowers all coming together, much like us today, all coming together to enjoy time in the garden today. So Spanish needle or beggar's tick, many of you probably know about it mostly because of those wonderful seed these beautiful seeds that latch on to you and your pets while you're out walking. I think that's why they're called the farmer's friend, because they really just want to come and hang out with the farmer and get spread everywhere. It disperses very easily by that seed. I don't know if you can see here. When we get over to my table, I'll show you that one a little bit more, but it has two little teeth on the end that make it bidens, or two teeth. It has opposite leaves on that stem. You can see the leaf shape. And we have posted a few pictures of these more detailed aspects of the plant on the Florida School of Holistic Living Facebook page, so that you can get a chance to get a better look at some of these details. So today we're talking about Bidens alba. It's native to Florida. There are a lot of other species in that genus Bidens. Bidens Pilosa is one of them. And Stephen Herod Buhner writes a lot about this plant in the Herbal Antibiotics book, in a Healing Lyme book. And Stephen Herod Buhner refers to another variety of the Bidens Pilosa, but many agree that Bidens alba can be used in really similar ways. And the actions, look at this list of actions. This is from Herbal Antibiotics by Stephen Herod Buhner. This list of actions: antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, anti-malarial, antimicrobial, antiseptic, astringent, immunomodulant, vulnerary, all these different things that are within this really common weed. I'm sure some of you have even spent some time trying to pull this weed out of your yard, or maybe know people that have bought harsh chemicals to try to keep them out of their lawn. And this plant has all these benefits for you, just waiting. It's also a really amazing pollinator plant. if you are looking for a simple plant that would grow really easily in full sun, Florida sandy soil, I'd like to recommend Biden's alba because it grows so prolifically just from that seed. Even though it's an annual or a long perennial, you'll find that you have it throughout the year because it propagates so easily from that seed. Okay, so those seeds here, you can see the two little teeth. That's how it gets connected to you whenever you're out hiking or your pets are out hiking. Biden's two teeth. And really all you have to do is collect a few of these. In fact, I had about that many that I brought to our yard, and now we have it everywhere. I have access to it pretty much year round. It's super hardy. It doesn't mind the lack of rain that we've had lately. Sometimes it'll show signs of being unhappy if it gets too cold. But generally speaking, it's a really hardy plant, and it mostly just needs a lot of sunshine, especially if you want those flowers. So all parts are used. I typically use just the aerial parts. And aerial parts means all the above ground, but I've seen historical uses of even the root system, but typically I'm just using the leaves, and most often I'm using just the young leaves. The young leaves, a few in a salad can be really nice. They have a nice dense nutrition, similar to that of maybe spinach, so very nutrient dense. And those young ones, I can throw a few in a salad. Otherwise, I throw the older leaves into soups or stews, or use it to make, I use the young leaves also for making pesto because I'm using it fresh. But the older leaves I like to cook a little bit. A lot of those actions that you saw in the list get degraded or denatured whenever you apply heat. So if I'm really trying to access it for more of the medicinal qualities, then I want to keep it cold or without that heat interaction. But these young fresh leaves can be really nice just thrown into a salad or nibbled a couple here and there. So lots of historical uses. Stephen Buhner isn't the only one that has used it as an antimicrobial. It's considered a broad spectrum antibacterial. It's also been used in protocols for things like malaria and staph infections. But if you are experiencing any of those things, what I'm saying right now, even what Stephen Buhner is saying, cannot replicate anything that your medical provider advice might give you. I'm not here to diagnose or treat anything, just sharing some historical benefits and how I use it in my life. It's also part of protocols for Lyme disease, co-infections that are really common in this age, especially in the Northeast and Florida. In those protocols, it's often recommended that you either use a fresh tincture or a leaf juice. So if you're a juicer, it can be great to go out and get some of those young leaves and add it to whatever juice blend that you're working with to make it have your body have access to those medicinal qualities as well. I occasionally dry it just to have on hand because I have so much of it, and sometimes it ends up in places that I don't really want it to live, so I pull it out and I dry it, and then I just throw it into tea blends, and what I'm really accessing there is more of the nutritive benefits, because whenever you're dehydrating Bidens, you're losing some of those medicinal benefits. So, another way I have recently learned about was a cold infusion. So, those young leaves that I was telling you about, at the end of the summer when there's been rain and lush, happening all over my yard, and I have lots of Bidens available to me, actually any day, it's not just at the end of summer, I might go out and get enough of those young leaves to make a cold infusion. So those of you who maybe didn't catch the tea blending workshop last week, a cold infusion is where you're taking plant material and you're adding cold water, or room temperature. It doesn't have to really be from a refrigerator or anything like that. It's just room temperature. And you're letting it steep for a longer period of time. Typically, whenever I'm brewing tea or tisane for a warm beverage or to support my immune system in some way, I'm letting it steep for like 15 or 20 minutes with that hot water. But with a cold infusion, you're letting it go a little bit longer. So I might take those young leaves and I would fill up my jar about almost all the way up, actually. And occasionally I throw in the flowers if they happen to be there, but usually I hang on to the seeds and I either give them to friends or disperse them on my walks or let them hang out and be compost in my yard. And I would put them into this jar. Now, if I were really making this tea right now, I would do something called muddling, but for the sake of this, I'm just filling up my jar most of the way and then adding cold water. Okay, and then I'm putting the lid on and I'm letting it steep in that cold water for a longer period of time, 6 hours. I might put it in the fridge simply because we're in Florida and sometimes there are molds and things in the air that I don't really want to drink. So that would be a cold infusion.
I got a question if you want.
There's a question?
It says, can it reverse any effects of Lyme disease? I have a droop in the left side of my face.
So I would recommend finding your a local herbalist or someone in your area that could support you in that very important discovery of how you might be able to use Bidens. And I feel like I'd have so many more questions for you to be able to support you in that question. But thank you. It's a really good question, and I feel like Lyme disease is such a big and changing topic that it's really hard to talk about for my garden right now. So thank you for the question. Feel free to email me if you want to go in a little bit more detail at maggie@holisticlivingschool.org, MAGGIE at holisticlivingschool.org, if you have questions that I feel like maybe take a little more time. Any more questions? Okay, so the next way I use it might be in making a tincture. Now, in making a tincture, I wouldn't stick it in the water after I cut it from my garden. I would bring it in, probably wouldn't let it sit in the sun either. I would just let it wilt a little bit and make sure it doesn't have little animal friends of any kind, bug friends of any kind. Depending on where it was in the garden and how much pollen is in the air, I might rinse it, but then I would really want to make sure I damp dry it between paper towels and then let it hang for just a little while, because I really want to access the fresh aspect of the plant. This is one of the plants that I really try to avoid the whole drying process. I want to capture the fresh qualities of the plant. And then I would muddle it. And you can use a mortar and pestle if you have that on hand, but mostly your goal is to break open some of those plant cells so that you're accessing what's inside the cell. And plants have this beautiful plant cell that can be kind of hard because they're so full of minerals. So you want to do what you can to access what's inside. When I'm making a tincture, I really want the healthiest, most ready to provide nourishment to me as I possibly can get my hands on. Or if I'm not feeling well and I have a little respiratory thing going on and I just want to have access real quick, then we go for it. So I'm muddling, and with the mortar and pestle, I'm pressing. I'm not trying to pulverize it in the same way I would if I were making a pesto when I'm making a tincture. Mostly I'm just breaking up the cell walls. And it's possible to do it this way, you know, with the mortar and pestle, but I haven't always had that. And honestly, doing this does just as well, and I feel like I'm connecting with the plant too. So with the tincture, you're filling up in a really clean jar, probably not outside. You are filling up your jar. If I'm using fresh, I would actually add more plant material to this because it's fresh. And I typically push down a little bit, so I would add more plant material to this. Let's go get some. So I'm looking for, this is my backyard. I don't have pets, so I don't have to worry about marking of territory or anything like that. And for a lot of plants, when you're taking a cutting, you're going in where there is growth. So you can see on this one, there's new growth next to it. There are little nodes that are ready. So I would trim just above that, and then that can continue growing. And I might trim it a little closer to the node. Make sure that you are always collecting a plant that you have 100% certainty on the ID of that plant. Make sure that you've gone on lots of walks with friends. I know it's tempting now as I walk around my neighborhood. I see a lot of Biden's alba growing. There's even one yard in my neighborhood that has this red sign out front that whoever lives there is going to get fined if they don't clear down all of their Bidens from their front yard. And I'm tempted to knock on the door and say, hey, can I make a bunch of food and medicine from your front yard? But I want to make sure that I'm at least 10 feet from a roadway, and ideally 100 feet from a roadway. But because I live in the city, I feel comfortable with gathering things from my backyard, because I know for 10 years we've sprayed nothing in our backyard that I wouldn't feel comfortable putting in my body. Basically, it's just water and worm tea and compost and things that have come from my kitchen. So I feel okay back here, but I'm not even sure I would collect from my front yard for medicine because I live near downtown. There's a lot of traffic, and I feel like I'm under some protection here because if I look up, I have some trees that are allowing filter of some of those contaminants from the air, and I want to take all those things into consideration. If I lived, you know, in the middle of nowhere, I had access to land on 100 acres or something, I'd feel comfortable collecting as much as the plant wanted to offer me. This plant grows really easily, and the bees don't mind sharing the flowers for me for medicine. So I have a little more. And I've been muddling it as I was chatting with you. And so I'm going to throw it into my jar. And then each plant has the most ideal level of alcohol for extracting certain things. And many of your herbs that you can make a tincture out of are completely fine with like 80 proof alcohol, which would be 40% alcohol. So for the proof, you're going half, and that's your percentage of alcohol in whatever the alcohol is. These plants, Biden's Pilosa or Biden's alba, really need more alcohol to really access, or a higher level of alcohol in the alcohol, to be able to access the the constituents that you're going for. Specifically, it's around as close to 80 or 90% as you can. And depending on where you live, that's easier to access than other places. There are companies that will ship 190 proof alcohol to Florida. And I don't remember any of those right now. If you know, you can post them in the comments. Or if you live in places like North Carolina where you can easily access it, then do that. But for Biden's, if you're tincturing it, you want to make sure you have a really high alcohol to be able to access the plant constituents that are going to give you the actions that you saw in Stephen Buhner's book. Thinking about all the health and wellness for you, your families, my family, with this tincture. With any tincture, you're filling up whatever jar you're making it in within a 1/4 inch of the very top. Oops. That dehydrated that. Whew. So you know it's a really high alcohol whenever it evaporates that quickly. I spilled a little bit and it's already almost gone. So I'm going to put my lid on quickly. And there's the tincture. I will label it and I'll put where I got the plant material, the date I created it. I'll put the plant that's in it and the level of alcohol, the proof of alcohol or the percentage of alcohol, to make sure I know when it's sitting there I can know exactly what's inside that jar. So whenever you're making a tincture, you're making sure that your plant material is completely covered. With fresh plant tinctures, you're putting a lot more plant material. I usually say fill it up 3/4 of your jar because fresh plant material already has a lot of liquid in it, so it's not going to need as much room to absorb whatever liquid you're tincturing in. But with dried plant material, it would be closer to a half. If you're new to the idea of tincturing, when you're tincturing dried plant material, it's closer to a half. Although for Biden's, I really try to get the fresh whenever possible. Is there a question?
What if you absolutely cannot ingest alcohol? What else can one make a tincture with?
So tinctures historically are made with alcohol. Like if you go into old herbals and a lot of family traditions, if they say the word tincture, they're thinking of alcohol. But today, if you say tincture, it's pretty common that it's either apple cider vinegar, and that is the vinegar that specifically apple cider, it's a fermented product, it's full of minerals and potassium and all these wonderful benefits for you. You can use that, does not have alcohol. It doesn't extract the same plant constituents, but you definitely would access a lot of the nutritive benefits of the Biden's alba with apple cider vinegar. Another commonly used liquid, or menstruum is the term, another commonly used menstruum is glycerin. And glycerin it's not the same glycerin that maybe you would go into a drugstore to purchase to make bubbles or something like that. You want to make sure that you're getting glycerin that is designed for making things that you're putting into your body. So that glycerin you can get from places like Mountain Rose Herbs. If you're local, Leaves and Roots would probably carry it. I can't guarantee they have it now, but they typically carry it. I believe that there are other local, any apothecary or local herb store would carry glycerin that would be helpful in making tinctures. And glycerin is somewhere between water and alcohol in terms of what it's extracting. I know of no one that's been able to figure out how to extract specifically Biden's alba with glycerin. The actions that I showed you from Stephen's book, but glycerin is really effective at extracting many other plant qualities from a lot of other plants, and it tastes good. It's really sweet, and I feel like part of nourishing the body and building the immune system is accessing that sweet that isn't necessarily, you know, that bad for you. So, yeah.
Follow-up question,
Yeah.
vegetable glycerin? With question mark?
Yes, vegetable glycerin. So vegetable glycerin or glycerin is made as a byproduct of the vegetable oil industry. So you can get, it could be coconut glycerin, it could be just vegetable glycerin, it could be canola glycerin. There's also palm oil glycerin. So you get to decide what type of glycerin fits best for what you're trying to do. And they're all, in terms of making a tincture, they're all really similar. And if you're planning to use glycerin, remember, if you get it from a store, that, you know, a store that is selling it so that you can use it to make tinctures, make sure that you're diluting it with up to 40% water. So glycerin is really thick and goopy and is great at preserving. So great that it's okay for you to add up to 40% of distilled water, really well filtered water. I wouldn't recommend any tap water added. You might want to do a little more research if that's the only thing you have access to. You may be better off just using 100% glycerin, although it wouldn't be able to extract as many things without that water. So remember, it would be 60% glycerin and 40% water as your liquid in that tincture. Great questions. Any more questions? Okay, cool. So, Biden's alba, related to Biden's Pilosa. Biden's Pilosa has been naturalized in the US. You don't see it as often. One thing that I know that you can distinguish between Biden's alba and Biden's Pilosa is the flower. So, little tiny flower left. So this is Biden's alba. The flower very clearly has lots of those little yellow flowers all clustered together, and it has these this one has these 6 petals that are individual flowers on their own. For the Biden's Pilosa variety, the white ones would be a lot smaller or maybe non-existent, and the yellow ones would be more obvious or non-existent. It's how I know to distinguish them. Any more questions? Okay, thank you for your time in my garden. It's been lovely once again to get a chance to share with you one of the plants that I hold near and dear in my life and like to incorporate into my family's life in several ways. I look forward to reading your comments. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll see you next time.